Hello, I'm Langston, and I'm back on my channel, Military Election Forecasting. And today I'm going to be discussing Trump's pathway to 270. I have two pathways from him I'm going to be, getting into and, describing what I think his path to 270 would look like. Anyway, make sure to, subscribe to my channel. Like, it's kind of hard to make all this content, if I'm not really, getting the benefits of that. I would really appreciate it if you guys, subscribe. Also, like this video as well. Please check out my recent video. Yesterday, I came out with a video of me talking and predicting the Senate elections, as well as earlier, this week, I came out with a video about my gubernatorial election predictions. I'm going to try to really start ramping up and releasing a lot of videos these upcoming, weeks going into election day. Anyway, I'm going to be, diving straight into it. So there are seven states that are true toss-ups in this election. Obviously, some states do lean in other directions. Also, Texas is a state where you're not going to see Donald Trump win by some huge margin. I think Texas will probably be under 5 points for him. But regardless, like it's still a state I don't realistically see Kamala having too much of a shot at winning. I think our chances of winning the state is like less than 20%, maybe like 15%. So I added it to this. So we have Donald Trump starting out at 219 and Kamala Harris starting out at 226. There's some competitive states for Kamala as well. Minnesota, Virginia, not really Colorado, but New Mexico, Nebraska second, Maine, New Hampshire. But these states, Donald Trump doesn't realistically have a solid chance of winning. They're all probably going to go to Kamala by well over five, some even, over 10. So you kind of get the point. But diving straight into it, I do want to say before I get into this video, there are two states I think the Trump campaign should not target. Like, I think these are two states Trump does not really have a good chance of winning. And I'm going to, dive into why Trump shouldn't really be fighting too hard to win these states, considering that his pathway to 270, he doesn't need them. And he's unlikely to win them, even if he does campaign. So the first two states I do have, I don't think that he has too good of a chance of winning, is Michigan, and a controversial one is Arizona. These are two states that even if he was running against Joe Biden, I think that Joe Biden would still be favored in these states. So starting off in Arizona, a lot of Republicans are very delusional about Donald Trump's chances. There's been a lot of polls that have gassed Donald Trump up in the state, but you have to realize that, in 2022, polls had Kerry Lake winning every poll. Like there was only like one or two polls that had Katie Hobbs even being in striking distance. 2022 showed Blake Masters and Mark Kelly being in a dead even race. And we know that, that race was not competitive. So you go back to 2016, Hillary Clinton did a lot better in Pima. I'm sorry, in Maricopa County, which is where 60% of the population of Arizona lives. Mitt Romney won this county by 11 points. She only lost it by less than three. You go to 2020, you'll see that Biden did 5 points better than he flipped this county. You go to 2022, Democrats dominated here. Like this county went to Mark Kelly by more than 6 points, and I do want to say I doubt that Kamala win it by that much, but you get the upward trend. Like Maricopa has a lot of these educated moderate voters. There used to be Republicans, back in the day, but that's changed. Like 2016, you saw a huge exit from the Republican Party. A lot of Republicans, moderate Republicans, traditional Republicans couldn't support Trump because of his rhetoric, the stuff he was saying about women, et cetera. 2020, a lot of Republicans exited again. There was a lot of, Republicans who voted for Trump in 2016, but after 4 years of his presidency, after the COVID-19 pandemic, after how he handled the Black Lives Matter protests, they were just really turned off by his rhetoric. And, since then, you've even seen that continue, it's particular in 2022. There's going to be a lot of Republicans that voted for Trump twice in the suburbs of Phoenix that are going to vote for Kamala because of, how turned off they are by Trump's rhetoric. And, denying that, like Trump can improve Hispanic Latino voters, he can improve with working class voters, but the demographic for that he's struggling with in Arizona are educated, moderate voters, not Hispanic voters, not, right, like not working class voters. Like, look at this Santa Cruz County, Hispanic border county. He did 12 points better in this county. He still, I'm trying to say, like, he still lost. Yuma, he did 5 points better in this county. Like, he still lost the state, right? Despite underperforming, despite Joe Biden underperforming with Hispanic voters, you still saw those areas trended against them. Let's look in, 2022. I know that, for example, Katie Hobbs, for example, She lost some of these border counties, like, for example, look at Yuma. She lost his county by 12. Biden only lost his county by 6. So she did a lot worse with Hispanic and Latino voters, but she was still able to win because of educated moderates in the suburbs. These are Mitt Romney, John McCain, Liz Cheney Republicans who will do anything to vote against Donald Trump. And, Donald Trump needs these voters to prevail in the state, and it's just unlikely that he's going to do that. He's likely going to lose Maricopa by like 3 or 4, maybe even pushing 5. And if he does that, Arizona, Maricopa makes up more than 60% of Arizona's electorate, and it's growing. It's one of the fastest growing counties in the country. It's likely going to make up a larger chunk of the population this election year. There's no way that Donald Trump's going to overcome that in the rural working class parts of the state or areas outside of Maricopa. So, his chances in Arizona are just not that likely. And there's no coalition that you can hear someone put together to justify why he's likely to win the state. The next state, is Michigan. Michigan is another state where Donald Trump, he needs a lot of things to go right to win. Like he needs for black turnout in Detroit to collapse. He also needs to stagnate these suburbs. Oakland, Grand Rapids, uh, Ottawa County. These are, former very uh, traditionally conservative suburbs that have shifted to the left, like numerous other suburbs around the country, because of them being turned out by Trump's rhetoric. And that's kind of problematic for Donald Trump. So the biggest issue that you hear brought up, to hurt Democrats is the Arab vote. Oh, well, Arab voters, they're not going to vote for Kamala, or a lot of them are even going to vote for Trump. Arabs only make up 2% of Michigan's population, and that's counting immigrants and the ones that are under 18 who can't even vote. So it's a lot less of that actually voters. And even if every Arab person voted for Donald Trump in 2020, Biden would have still won the state by a lot. Like, there's not that many of them. Like, Democrats don't net that much out of Arab communities to make that dramatic of a difference. That's just point blank, period. In 2022, Tudor Dixon made dramatic improvements with Arab voters. She cut, uh, what is it? She cut Gretchen Whitmer's lead down to 64. Gretchen Whitmer only got 60% of the vote in Dearborn. Biden got 69% of the vote in Dearborn. So Gretchen Whitmer did a lot worse in Dearborn. She did a lot worse in East Dearborn as well. Like she did a lot worse in the Muslim communities than Joe Biden did. But if you look at how she performed, she won Michigan by 11, right? Donald Trump lost Michigan by 3. Joe Biden only won the state by about 2.8. So you get what I'm trying to say. Like, it did not make that big of an impact. And Kamala Harris is not going to win Michigan by this much, but you get the point. Like, Arab voters got counteracted by black voters in Detroit, as well as, educated white voters in the suburbs and some working class areas in Wayne County as well. So, the Arab vote doesn't make up that large of a chunk of Michigan's population to, dramatically change the outcome of the results. When Hillary Clinton lost Michigan in 2016, you didn't hear anyone say, oh, she lost because of Arab voters. Arab voters is what caused her to lose. Like it was black voters in Detroit. It was working class white voters. It was her not improving by enough of educated white voters. It was a lot of other major demographic groups that made up a lot larger of a chunk of the population that caused her to lose a state. So, the Arab vote in Wayne is not going to make up nowhere near enough of a deficit to really, sink Kamala's chances in the state. I do want to say Democrats are somewhat struggling as of now to turn out young voters in Ann Arbor, and that could be problematic in another state that's, has a city that's very similar to Ann Arbor. But Ann Arbor usually voting picks up very close to election day in the city. But obviously, this could be showing that Kamala might be having problems with turning out young voters on universities. So that's something to note. But regardless, like Ann Arbor and Dearborn put together have half the population of Detroit. So yeah, I'm trying to say Democrats are doing very well with black voters in Detroit, at least as of now. That could slow down. You could see something change. But as of today, Democrats are doing excellent with turning out black voters. They're significantly doing better with turning out black voters in Detroit than the average in terms of turning out voters statewide, across Michigan of all demographics. So that's a very positive sign for them. They're also doing, really well with turning out black voters in the inner city of Flint as well. And even if black turnout in Michigan is bad, the biggest problem for Donald Trump in the suburbs is Oakland, like it's Grand Rapids, it's Ottawa, like these are left trending counties. And even if black turnout is bad in Michigan, like Donald Trump is likely going to lose ground in Oakland. Like he's likely going to lose ground in Kent. He's likely going to lose ground in Ottawa, the same way he did in 2020 and the same way he did in 2016. So you saw this where, he lost ground in these counties. You see these blue shifts here. That's unlikely to change, in this election, especially considering the rhetoric, especially considering how these voters, feel about populist rhetoric that they're not, necessarily fond to. So that's why, I doubt Trump's chances. I do think Trump has improvements he can make in both of these states. He can improve a lot with working class white voters in Michigan. He can improve a good bit with Hispanic voters in Arizona, improve a good bit with white working class, rural white voters in Arizona. But he can't overcome black voters in the inner cities, as well as, shifting suburbs to Democrats. And he can't overcome he can't overcome, educated white voters in the Maricopa County area. So now I'm going to be diving into the states where I think Donald Trump has a realistic path of winning. So the first path for him, I think, is, I think this is Trump's most likely path. So North Carolina is a state that Donald Trump has to hold on to, and any of his paths, like he cannot lose North Carolina. If he loses North Carolina, Donald Trump is done. But I do want to say there's a lot of favorable things going for Democrats in North Carolina, but Democrats in North Carolina have a very long history of struggling to turn out black voters in the efficient numbers they need to. We saw this in 2022. We saw this in 2020 to an extent, 2016, obviously. Like Democrats they don't stand on business when it comes to turning out black voters in North Carolina. And, maybe Kamala is the candidate that excites them to the numbers that Democrats finally need to win statewide. But until we see it, it's not going to happen. And people who think North Carolina is going to vote to the left of Georgia are delusional. They're delusional. That's all I can say. But regardless, like Democrats don't have they don't have the turnout organizations to turn out black voters in the numbers necessary for them to be feeling so confident about winning North Carolina. I definitely think Democrats can win the state, but it's worth to point out. And for Donald Trump, like unless he starts seeing the share of the electorate that's black go dramatically up, he shouldn't really have too much to worry about in terms of winning the state. He could easily lose it, but I'm trying to say until it happens, like I said, I believe it when I see it. So that's all I really have to say for North Carolina. He should hold on to the state. He could lose it, but he's still favored here. But creating the first path for him, in my opinion, would be for him to win Georgia, and winning Georgia, he would need for black turnout in the Atlanta metro area to go down. And that's a likely scenario. Like we saw in 2022, this was a Trump plus five electorate. Democrats struggled to turn out black voters in the marches they needed, at least in the first round. In the Georgia runoff election, they got the highest share of Georgia's electorate being black. Like I think that in the 2022 runoff, the electorate was like 31, 32% black. So he would have easily lost with the runoff electorate, but in the general electorate, he would have won convincingly. But if black turnout in the Atlanta metro area drops, Donald Trump is favored across the state. That just is what it is. I do want to say that Donald Trump will likely improve in the rural areas. The black belt is trending to the right as well. You have a lot of these black people who live in rural areas who are moving to the Atlanta metro area for better opportunities. So he has that. I think that, the exurbs are slow, like he's, not going to lose as much ground as he lost last time. These exurban counties, they're left trending as well, not as left trending as the Atlanta metro area itself. But regardless, like I think Donald Trump will slow down his gains. I mean, his losses in these counties in 2022. Herschel Walker was able to halt Democrats' progression. Like you see, he only did 1.1% worse in Cherokee, 1.8% worse in Forsyth. He actually did better in Hall. You see he collapsed in the Atlanta metro area itself. So I think that Donald Trump will be able to stop the bleeding in some of the Atlanta exurbs, but in the Atlanta metro area, his only hope is for black turnout to drop. Whether that happens or not, it is what it is. But that's Donald Trump's path in Georgia. He still has a good chance. I do think he's being overrated by a lot of his supporters in the state, but he does have a very clear path to winning the state. The next state for Donald Trump to win would be, Pennsylvania. And, if he wins Pennsylvania, which puts him to 270, he's already won Wisconsin. Wisconsin is more Republican than Pennsylvania. Wisconsin is a lot more white. It's a lot less educated. It's a lot more rural. A lot of demographics that benefit Republicans across the state. So in Wisconsin, you know, Donald Trump has a lot of room to improve in these rural working class areas. And he was even able to do that in 2020. Look at all these red shifts. And If he's able to continue that, like really speed up the improvements in these areas, he can easily win the state. I've always said that a lot of, Democrats are so confident that Kamala Harris is going to win Wisconsin. And, Kamala Harris might be narrowly favored in the state, but Donald Trump does have a realistic chance of winning. Like his chances in Wisconsin are very good. And I think that people don't talk about them enough. And, yes, the wild counties, like other suburbs, are trending against Donald Trump, but the wild counties are not that large. Like you see 60,000 votes. 100 and 59, right? 33. That's not that much compared to Oakland that cast 434,000 votes for Biden, or Montgomery or Chester or Delaware. Like that's not as large as Kent, or Ottawa or the Atlanta suburbs of Maricopa. So the Wisconsin suburbs are not that large. They don't make up that large of a chunk of the population, and they're still Republican. Like yes, the Republicans are losing ground, but they're still Republican counties. And if Democrats are struggling in Ann Arbor, they might struggle in Dane. Dane is very similar to Ann Arbor, very progressive, a college town. And if you're seeing struggles in Ann Arbor, you might see that continued in Madison. So that's something that Democrats should realistically look out for. If Kamala is struggling to turn out voters in Madison, if she's struggling to turn out Black voters in Milwaukee, like Democrats have consistently been struggling to hit the numbers they want to hit in terms of turning out Black voters in inner city Milwaukee. If she struggles with turning out those demographic groups, she's toast in the state. Obviously, as of today, I think that, she'll do a pretty decent job of doing that. But, regardless, Trump does have a very sizable chance of winning the state. If he improves enough in the rural working class areas, Democrats won't be able to turn out enough voters in Madison and Milwaukee or gain enough ground in the wild counties to be able to stop Donald Trump winning the state. Pennsylvania is a tough lift for Donald Trump, but he can still win. He needs for Black turnout in Philadelphia to drop. And right now, Democrats are doing a pretty good job of turning out inner city Black voters in Philadelphia, which is really problematic for the Trump campaign. But just because Democrats are doing well with them now doesn't mean they're gonna, that progression might not slow down. What's now might not be what's 2 weeks from now. Okay, so that's something that we should know. Regardless, like he needs turnout from Black voters in Philadelphia to fall. He doesn't need to do good in the suburbs of he doesn't need to do good in the suburbs, but if he can just halt Kamala's progression, like for example, Allegheny. He lost Allegheny by 20. If he loses it by 21 or 22, like he lost Chester by 17. If he loses this by 18, he lost Montgomery by 26. If he loses this by 28, if he loses Delaware by 28, he loses Bucks by like 5 or 6. Like that doesn't allow Kamala to gain that much ground in the suburbs with bad Black turnout in Philadelphia and Trump being able to really run it up in these real working class areas, cut the margins in Erie, cut the margins in Lackawanna, Trump could pull off a very, very extremely narrow victory in Pennsylvania, and that could, prevail him to winning across the state. But that brings me to the last pathway for Donald Trump. So, I'm going to take Georgia back and we can give Georgia to Kamala Harris. Assuming Kamala Harris does well with Black voters in the Atlanta metro area, there's another state I think Donald Trump has a realistic chance of winning that people don't talk about, and that's Nevada. If Donald Trump was to win Nevada, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, he would win the presidential election. In Nevada, for example, this is a state that's very working class, very, has a lot of issues for Democrats. And I do want to say I've been a huge doubter of Republicans' chances in Nevada, and I still wouldn't bet on Trump winning the state. But regardless, like Nevada is a state where Hispanic Latino turnout does matter. In Arizona, losing ground for Hispanic voters isn't really that important. And we saw that in 2020 to 2020. Biden lost a lot of ground for Hispanic voters in Arizona, but he still shifted the state dramatically to the left. But Nevada shifted to the right. So you know what I'm trying to say? Like it's clear that there's a difference between the two. But in Nevada, for example, if Democrats struggle with Hispanic Latino turnout in Las Vegas the same way they struggled in 2022, uh, Kamala could easily lose a state. If she's not doing too well with Hispanic voters in Clark, she's going to have to really run it up in Washoe, and she's going to need to improve with the few educated white voters in Clark County, run up the numbers of Black turnout, run up the numbers of Asian American turnout to counteract the losses she might have with Hispanic Latino voters. And there's a lot of polls that have Kamala doing well with Hispanic Latino voters, but there are some polls that show concerning signs. And if that is true, Nevada is a state where Kamala Harris could be doomed. Yes, the polls have Kamala Harris winning Nevada. Polls usually do overestimate Republican support in Nevada, but we know that polls change, right? Like polls overestimated Republican support uh, overestimated Democratic support in 2016 and 2020, but in 2022, it severely overestimated Republican support. So just because polls have consistently overrated Republican support in Nevada doesn't mean that might not be the case this election, right? So when looking at the trends, when looking at what some of the issues that Democrats have, Democrats could easily come up short in Nevada. This has been a tough lift for Republicans. They haven't been able to win here presidentially since 2004. But the math is there. It might not be likely. Donald Trump could easily win the state. If Kamala really is having issues with Hispanic Latino voters, Nevada will be the state where it shows the most because Democrats do rely on running up the numbers of working class Hispanics in Las Vegas to counteract these rural white voters, in the other parts of Nevada. In Arizona and Georgia, these states, would end up going to Kamala. They're oftentimes compared. Arizona is more so swing. It's more so entirely based off educated voters, which is why Democrats have such a consistent, lead in Arizona. Georgia, it's a lot of education polarization as well, but it's mainly racial polarization. Similar to Colorado and Virginia, they're both left trending, but Colorado is, more favorable to Democrats because, it's purely education based for the most part. Virginia, Democrats are improving with educated voters, but they still need high turnout from black voters to win comfortably, or, they still need support from black voters to win Virginia. So there's a difference between Arizona and Georgia. A lot of people like to compare them, but there are, some pretty sizable differences. But, this is my path. Like, for Donald Trump to win, he needs to win Wisconsin, Nevada, and Pennsylvania, or he can afford to lose Nevada, but he needs to win Georgia. That's the path for him, in my opinion, for him to realistically have a chance of winning. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe down below. Make sure you have a nice day, you guys. Goodbye.